Okay, everyone, welcome. I could introduce dignitaries, but you're all dignitaries. For those of you that may not know, this room is filled with people from our commissions. It's being filmed, and it's filled with key staff. And the reason is because you guys are connectors, and you guys are the ones that are going to carry this message. Mayor Paris and the City Council are 100% behind this. The mayor is very enthusiastic about it. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it today because he got called in his other job as a lawyer. He got called to a conference, so he was not able to make it, a trial conference. So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing this topic. And the reason I say it's a pleasure is because this is incredibly important. If you don't understand how much it's important to have a walkable and livable community, you haven't lived in a place that does have that. And you also may not understand, but you will at the end of these next 3 days, how important you are and how important this is to the city of Lancaster. We are not yet a walkable and livable community to the standards of other communities. And it's important to recognize that. But it is fundamentally important. I've had the pleasure and the honor of living in the South Bay cities. And the reason I say it's an honor is because when you live in a place that's walkable and when you live in a place that has pedestrian facilities, it fundamentally changes a community. It's friendlier. It's healthier. You have people that know who other people are. You congregate. You are more engaged in your community. It does so many things that we don't even know until you live in a place like that. And again, we are not where we need to be yet, but we will get there. That's why it's important. I will predict that in 10 years or so, when we're able to have a plan and then start executing it and have a lot of it done, that this is going to be more important than what we've done on Lancaster Boulevard. It's going to be as important as getting a handle on public safety for this community because it has far-reaching impacts on everything. That's the importance of it. The vision. There's a lot of people who are blessed with great vision. You know, I have never thought I have great vision. I can understand things. My gift is that I'm able to get things done, and the city staff's gift is they can get things done. You need vision and you need people that get things done. For us that get things done, we're fond of saying there's 10 people with vision, but there's only one person that can get it done. So we need both of that. But the vision that we need to have is to really go outside our comfort zone and envision what this community can look like. Lancaster Boulevard was somewhat easy to vision because for those of you who grew up here, all it is what it was 20 or 30 years ago. It's the center of the community. Sure, it looks different, but you knew that if we made it inviting, it would become the center of the community. Again, it has. To be honest with you, I have a difficult time, and I'm hoping Mr. Burden and Mr. Snyder will help us out. I have a difficult time envisioning Lancaster and the Antelope Valley as a walkable community. And I'll be real honest, I just have a tough time with that. We're a 100-year-old city. We're 95 square miles. There's a lot of challenges. We have wide roads. There's weather challenges. There's all those things. So what I really want to get out of this, hopefully, is to see that vision. And again, I ask you folks to also see that vision, but also look at how we're going to get it done. And also be willing to start out and say, we're not where we need to be. When we do the walk audits over the next couple of days, it's not that we want people to put a happy face on it and say, yeah, this is great. We really want to hear people say, no, this impedes me from walking. This impedes kids from doing this. This impedes us from doing this. We want to know what the deficiencies are because that's how we have to deal with it. And then what I'd ask is that you know, when I'm in something that's the long haul, what I try to do is vision the future. Just say, forget how we're going to get there. Think 10 years from now. And I want you to really think of a Lancaster that is walkable, that is friendly to pedestrians, that you see people out every day, that you see people exercising in all areas of the community, that you see people walking their pets, that you see people congregating in different places, that you see people more engaged that know their neighbors. That's what you need to vision 10 years from now. And again, I don't know how we're going to get there, but we're going to get there together. We're going to learn that. One key group of folks that's going to get us there is the Architectural and Design Commission. I don't think they get the credit that they deserve. I'm partial to them because they're a group of people that just gets things done. They don't do it for fanfare, they get it done. And when you look at some of the things they've done, they completely redid how homes will be built in Lancaster. Not just the architecture of the home, but how they're laid out, the pedestrian aspects of them, the walkability aspects. And if you think that was inconsequential, that was 20 years in the making. There was always someone who stopped it, but they did that. They took an idea of to get healthier, and they started with April and her husband, the Land Coaster bike rides. Well, that was phenomenal because it's gotten people to see that you can ride bikes on streets and it's safe, and it really showed that, look, this is a bikeable community. And they're the kind of group that gets things done and just doesn't talk about it. So they're the right people to help us lead this effort. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce the chairman or chairperson of this commission, April Bartlett.
Thank you, Mark. First, I'd like to introduce the architectural design commissioners that are here today. We have Drew Mercy, Tim Wiley, Diana Cook, Sandra Pursley, and I think Matt Buchanan. Thank you for coming today. The Architectural Design and Planning Commission is responsible for overseeing the drafting process of the city's master plan for bikeways and trails. Today's session on walkability is a significant component in the development of this planning process. I'd like to thank you all for participating today in this very important planning process. And now I'd like to introduce Dan Burden.
Good morning, Lancaster. And I hope I got the pronunciation correct. I come from Ohio originally, and we had a Lancaster. But it is Lancaster, correct? Okay, good. I am delighted to be here, and especially to hear the story and the link between how some of the folks on the commission and planners had been to a presentation I did 8 years ago where I was able to put a face to the future and now come here and see that you built it. What an amazing story that a Dan and a beer, I think is the way I'm going to phrase it from now on out, can change the way people live in an entire community over time. Obviously, it's the people who stay here and work out those finite details, who take the arrows in the back, who have lots of scars, that really are the ones who are doing it. But what I'm hopeful of doing with today's presentation is to share with you that you're not alone, that this is very important, that it is the only thing that's really going to be the big engine for the economy of the future. Just last week, the U.S. Senate heard a report from several speakers, but one of them, Chris Lineberger, was able to share the latest statistics in real estate, that cul-de-sac communities are only now 30% of what the home buying market wants. Used to be 80, 90%, but now it's down to 30%. They are saying that it's the cul-de-sac parts of towns that may not ever increase the value of their property. So if they've been dropping, they may stay at a low level like that indefinitely. But what is good news is that the other 70% of the U.S. home buying public wants walkable communities. They may not know exactly what they are, but they know that that's what they want. They have images in their head of what they are. And so I totally celebrate the hard work you're doing to craft the code that it's going to take, all the language and so on. And so my mission today is first this morning, and then later this afternoon, working with department heads and others who are able to be here this morning, but later with your key staff, to really get across not only why this is the direction to go, but how others are doing it and what some of the hardships you're going to face as you make the shift. You have to make the shift, but it's going to change a lot of cultures. The way we build our streets, the way we handle our parking, everything is going to change. I tend to be a very visual person, so if it's okay, I'm going to go right into the presentation mode, and I'm not responsible for the chiropractic work that we're going to have to do with the screens to the side. So figure out where where it's best to watch the future emerge, but whichever location, and feel free to shift to a different chair or just to change your body posture from moment to moment to not have a strain. But here's the point. Every street that we built in time is going to be rebuilt. And they're going to be rebuilt for people. They're still going to work for transit, emergency responders, sanitation. They're going to work for everybody, but they're going to work with a different level of aesthetic, of quality, and beauty. And if I leave behind one point today, this is the point I want to leave behind. We cannot afford any longer to build any street that does not add value to land. Up until now, almost every street we've built has subtracted value from land. And we could afford that for a while. We can no longer afford that. The future is going to call for very thoughtful design and making sure we get the detailing correct. Now this is just an example of a community, this one in Colorado, where they've laid all the sewers and pipes, everything's in place, but there will never be one home ever built there. In the small town I recently moved away from, High Springs, Florida, we have 2 such developments. And I can guarantee you there will never be a home. Those years are gone. What we will build will look very different, of course, and the good news is we're returning to the past. This is a town where I lived for 16 years. This was the conduit to get people who worked in the downtown in the capital of Tallahassee home to their suburbs. That road will shrink. It will go down to 4 lanes with a boulevard, with bike lanes. That's a guarantee. One good reason for doing that is we can no longer afford to separate Florida State University from its community. Every year, one student has died there trying to get across this street. And for what purpose? To build in a place that wasn't built at the right scale, the right density, or the right anything, and now we're recognizing that. But think about the cost it's going to take to rebuild a street like this into one of beauty and charm and dignity. And it truly is going to call for new street design guidelines. That's one reason I'm very excited to be working with Ryan Snyder, is that he's pulling together the best experts in the nation to write the new Bibles to give authenticity and correctness to what your engineering teams and planning teams are going to need to do. So, one might say, well, this is not walkable. Am I right about that? And where are the sidewalks and so on? Now, I need to show you the whole picture. The sidewalks are there, but they're on the wrong side of the street. It was politically easy to put the sidewalks where no one would complain. And now, this same city, the citizens have voted against having sidewalks on their side of the street. That's where we are. That's our problem, that we have an uninformed public. Our staff, even in many cases the state, Caltrans, now realize the need for sidewalks, but we have people that just don't want those people in front of their house. Those people happen to be their children. You can't use this sidewalk. How do you get to it? We got ourselves into a pickle, and we're going to have to get ourselves out. So, the very, very first presentation I ever gave on this theme, which was about 18 years ago, this town came to a presentation I did, kind of like what you guys did, and they went back and they built this street. Now, it's not complete, but you can see the side that they have completed, and you can see the difference in size and scale, and why one we would call walkable and the other not. Now, there's sidewalks on both sections, but truly to get across the street, adding in the additional tools, what I call inset parking, curb extensions, is truly the magic that starts to add that aesthetic and that quality, and that's what you've done. Now, how big is this, and what is the implication for Lancaster to get the downtown and many places healed? This is West Palm Beach. I helped with a charrette in 1994, and I'm going to show you what this scene looks like 4 years later. One developer alone brought in $1.3 billion. This has become a hot spot. Now, when we go back, in that era, virtually everyone had fled the downtown. There were still some people there, but they weren't the people you wanted to bump into, especially at night. And in fact, when we were doing the charrette, 2 of our cars were broken into. When they hired their first transportation planner, brought him down from Canada, Ian Lockwood, Ian had somebody run across the yard where he was staying, chasing somebody else with a gun. I mean, that's where it was, and this is where they were 3 years later. Once you have the vision, and once people are willing to work together, we end up with a totally different condition. Let's go back in time. In 1972, this was a saying or a statement made by a Los Angeles area traffic engineer. And we tried that. We tried to get rid of people, and we still have traffic. In fact, guess what? The opposite corollary is true. The more people you have, the more space there is for people to drive because there are fewer drivers. So in San Diego, a recent statement from a traffic engineer is correct. Build the villages, and that's your challenge. Every neighborhood can become a village. Instead of building traffic, we build community. It is such a simple concept. It takes more work, but it's exactly what we must do if we're not to be stuck in traffic all the time. There is no other answer. And I think it's also important to point out that once we start to get a lot of good mixed use in, that everything is walkable scale, that all of a sudden people will, even if they don't walk more, even if they don't bike, they're going to drive shorter distances. Think about that. If we want emergency responders to get to a call, then we better take a lot of the heavy growth of traffic out of the picture and start to make the most important places closer together and things like that. So these are really important concepts, but they're so simple to execute once we understand what they're all about. Now, this is Beverly Hills, Rodeo Drive, and the principles that I show here are exactly the principles that you are applying here and need to. It's really about getting that connectivity in, providing the right design, the right density, and the right mix, and the street connectivity is a very big part of this. So that's why with the study that you're now undertaking with Ryan Snyder, and I'm delighted to be part of this team, is that you're going to do some infill. You'll make more connections between, say, some cul-de-sac streets and so on, and you'll start to get the right scale to the street. And all of a sudden, people will see a rise in the value of their properties where these things are done and beg for these changes in the areas where it's not occurring. Because over time, there will be many studies, and people will realize the value of the actions that you're already taking in certain areas. It's also important to point out that we won't be able to save every place. Some areas will go back to another type of land use over time. But the critical areas, the strip centers, which already have some pretty good locations and service roads and so on, those are the areas that are going to convert. And that's what I want to talk about in my first presentation. I'll be doing 2 presentations this morning. So how do we get those places to come together? But before we get into that, I want to set a stage and talk about the things we value. And I believe this mic is live, right? I can walk and go somewhere else. I'm told I get dingy if I get away from these lights, but it's okay. I'm not important. The image is. So I started this journey that I'm on, been on the road steadily now for 16 years. I started it actually when I was 21 years old. I had read the last great writing of John Steinbeck, Travels with Charlie. The story of he and his pet poodle, Charlie, traveling across America. At the time, John was pretty aware he wouldn't live more than another year or 2, and he didn't. And he wanted to see his country. It was toward the end of the book, got to this paragraph that stayed with me. It had sticking power. He basically said, America is out of sync with its values. We say we're for children, we're for beauty, we're for equality, whatever, and then we build this. And all it would take is any of us driving a vehicle, and this is nothing against vehicles, but to look out the window of our car and to realize who we're not caring for. A grandmother that would like to take a walk with her grandchildren. Anyone that shouldn't be teetering on the edge. We need also to change not only our built environment, but the way we go about building, because we need the public with us. So the practice that we follow, the engagement of our community is vital. You could put in all the best tools, but you're going to get pushback. People won't understand. But once you start to engage people and they speak your language, then it will make a lot of sense. I think it's over a year ago that Ryan and I were able to be part of this film shoot. It's going to be shown national public television, fairly widespread, in 3 hours worth of sections. And it's really all about the health of America and how we're going to change the built environment. And we better do that. I think many of you already are familiar with the fact, and it's an absolute fact, that your children, our children, are not going to live as long as we do, on average. We've lost that. What we're now hoping for is we can rescue the next generation of children. We're growing fat. We're growing so fat that we've become the fattest nation in the history of the world. And we can't afford that. The cost is staggering. It's also very important to understand that if we are to have affordable lifestyles, all of us, then we have to get away from spending 25% of the dollar we earn on our automobiles, on our transportation. Think about that. There is no nation on earth that spends 25 cents of the dollar that gets earned on transportation. This is putting us in a non-competitive field with the world economy. Now, if you add to that the healthcare costs, which are already approaching 20 cents on the dollar, and if we don't do something about our lifestyles, we're talking about 30 cents on the dollar. So you add 25 cents and 30 cents, we're draining 55 cents out of somebody's pocket, which means we're even less likely to compete with the world economy. In too many cases, people cannot work in the city where they're employed. The firemen, policemen, teachers, nurses, in many cases are no longer living in the communities they serve. I would love to have an emergency responder living on my street. This exclusionary housing concept has never served anyone well. And we're going to have to get back the whole notion that the scale of homes, the density of homes, the mix of homes, where we put them, and being very inclusionary has got to be part of the answer. I'm now going to share with you a beautiful ray of hope. This is a town, Albert Lee, Minnesota, where as an experiment we took Dan Buettner, author of Blue Zones and now a new book called Thrive, who was on Oprah yesterday afternoon, talking about the happiest city in the United States. Does anybody know what that happiest city is? The happiest city in the United States. It's in California. San Luis Obispo. And the big reason, and when you read his book, Thrive, I recommend you go out and buy it. I think I've got it. Yeah. I'll pass it around. Thrive describes why San Luis Obispo has become such a great place to live. Walkability, bicycling, people in neighborhoods working with people in neighborhoods to rebuild their city. You don't have to live near the beach to be happy. You have to live in a city where everybody socializes, engages, walks, bikes, talks, and that is the significance of this study that you're undertaking. The good news is, if you choose to, you can go to hear Dan Buettner speak myself, 3 others, around the theme of vitality cities. It's going to be in Manhattan Beach on February the 10th. It's a TED presentation. Those of you who are familiar with TED, very, very, very well pulled off presentation. It's a 2-hour evening, and it's going to be February the 10th. Now let's talk about happiness. Does everybody see the rise in the gross national product up to about the year 2000? And the other line's the one I'm more interested in focusing on, how happy people are. Here's the interesting point. People are no happier today than they were during the Great Depression. There was a blip of happiness. Does everybody see when it occurred? It was in the 60s. Now, I don't know why. We think it's the Beatles. But this is what the 1960s looked like in Bryant Park. These people are stoned. This is the same scene today. Bryant Park is now a place for people. By taking and making just a few minor changes, this park came alive with people. It was always waiting, but it needed the right chemistry to occur. That's what you're doing with your downtown. And it will pay huge dividends once you get enough going. Now, here's one of the things they did. They lowered the wall. Before, people couldn't see into the park, so people didn't go to the park unless they wanted to be mugged or stoned or not seen. And now everybody wants to go there to be seen. And it's just that simple. You change a couple little things, and now this becomes the living room or the front porch to a great city. Let's talk about dollars. I believe that we've reached peak VMT, vehicle miles traveled per person, per day, per city, per day in the nation. I don't think we'll ever see vehicle miles traveled as high as they are today. Now, they started to level off before the recession, 3 years before the recession. So we know there are a lot of forces involved, but it's building the infrastructure so that people don't have to drive as far that's going to change and keep it coming down. That would be great news if we can do that. But you can see how we are adding to the VMT clear up until 2005 before it leveled off. What we know is nations that have a lower vehicle miles traveled are going to be more competitive. That's what we've got to figure out. How can we get the average number of miles a person drives per day, per family, say down to 20? Does anybody here know if currently you drive 30 miles a day or more? Is that right? How about 20 miles or more? The point is, if you can drive 20 miles a day or less, you're part of the future. But how do we get it to where everybody can afford to do that? Here's another reason why. I just heard, and I've got to validate it, that there's some counties in Washington state that can no longer buy asphalt. Not being made. They can't buy it. Doesn't matter how much they pay. It would have to be shipped from another whole region of the country. We're running beyond what's called peak oil. And we need the oil. We need it to drive. We need it for many things, pharmaceuticals, for our food. And if we are now saying we have to shift the percentages and we can't lay asphalt, and again, it's just the very tip, and I have to validate that that's actually true. Think about where we are. We can't keep doing what we were doing 3 years ago. And so building cities is the only way we're going to make it. We can't afford the cost that it's going to be. So here are 2 options. We keep building our traffic, and we add 25% more traffic. That's the model that we've projected ourselves to up until this point. And it's still what our transportation models are set for. 2.5% growth per year. Now, it's not happening, but that's still the way the models read. But our other choice, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about this morning, is how do we now get back to building traditional communities where we don't grow our traffic, we grow our people. So I'm going to just explain it in pure, raw form at first. And by the way, throughout all of my presentation, I want to make the great assumption, and I think it's a correct one, that all I'm doing is validating. Is that correct? I'm not presenting anything new, but I'm proving to you that these data do exist and that we've got to do these things. So, highly walkable is on our left. I'm sorry, on our right, and non-walkable is on the left. So the good news is the two can just flip-flop. You can change one into the other. And when it doesn't make all the sense from the air, then we go down to the ground. I think we can see where you would rather spend time. We're going to walk, talk, socialize, shop, all the things you want to do. My suspicion is you don't want to do it in the scene in El Monte. Is that correct? But Healdsburg, that's a different thing. Am I right about that? And you can see it in many, many ways. So how do we do that? How do we convert this area of Tampa to a walkable place? Look at the open land, what's accessible right next to the downtown. And it seems like every town has these opportunities. When we went in and laid this out, we basically said we have to connect everybody to the water, to whatever the open space is. It may not be water, it might be something else in your case, but we have to give them a view. And notice that by doing it this way, by preserving the waterfront or the open land for the public with trails there, and then connecting the streets back, all these homes that already existed have a much higher value. And that's my point. Everything you plan, every street that you build, had better add value to everyone's property. Not just on that street, but on all streets. 90% of the work that's being done today is not doing this. And that's got to stop. We've got to only build things that pencil out for the greater good of all people. Now, if we want less of this, it's so simple. We build for this. By the way, to build for people costs about 1/10 of what it costs to build for the car. You don't have to park a bicycle in a big lot. You don't have to park people's shoes. Keep them with them. So right now, though, we're stuck in a rut. All of the models, the predictive models, the way we measure our success, levels of service, only gives one thing. So what I'm saying is we need a new beaker. We need a measurement that says if we're going to be measuring our success, we've got to measure how many something we get, how many children we see walking, how long people linger, how many bikes we see go by, all these things. And you get to a really well-transformed town, you'll see the difference. Here's the measuring the level of service, way out of scale of what they need. By the way, that road only carries 8,000 cars. But in Madison, that carries virtually no cars. I think for a few hours a day it's open, but it's become the great, great place. So this is the image I wanted to get to show you, is if I go to Vancouver on a weekend, I can photograph 3 different weddings taking place by bicycle. To me, that's your beaker. But it needs to be how many people go to the Embarcadero to have their wedding pictures taken, because it's such a beautiful place now. And truly, they brought the entire wedding party there. How many of you have been to State Street in Santa Barbara? Used to be a 4-lane road. Now, they took away a huge amount of lanes, half of them. They built the bike lanes, and State Street is now one of the very, very, very finest models in the nation. You're in that top 5 now, by the way, in my eyes. Now, you need the buildings to fill in, you need the people, but you did the right things in terms of the built environment, and this is what I would expect to see as an ordinary thing on your street in time. So that's the way I would measure. I would also measure how well people talk and stop and photograph or draw illustrations of your main street. How many times a day that you see somebody settle in pad and paper to draw one of your street scenes. That's, to me, as important as level service. And you can get there, and I know you can get there. This, by the way, may say it all. It's a street that has gone through a profound change. It used to be a stripped-out street in Vancouver. It's called West Broadway. And today, this street has added so much in ways of stores and things that most people don't even own a car. Or if they used to own two, they own one. And you go back a quarter mile along this entire corridor, every home went up in value 4 times. That's my point, is we pick those streets that are going to give us that return, we work on them, we make them inclusionary for everybody, and now we need the tools to do that, and that's why I'm so delighted with Ryan's new design guide that's going to be specific to the Los Angeles area. And that's going to start when, Ryan?
Well, it's already starting. The shred will be March 14th and 15th.
Okay.
We'll have a draft done by late spring and then sometime in the summer, a completed document.
Good. Okay, well, moving on. I just want to introduce a couple of themes that will hopefully stick and resonate. Is we got to get back childhood. How many of you, when you were children, could walk or bicycle to school? How many today have children or grandchildren who walk or bicycle to school? You see my point? It's not one thing we did wrong. It's hundreds. We were only thinking of building our cities for our cars. Many things have changed. Children have other things to do. But we've got to give them back their feet. We've got to give them back their hearts, their lungs, their circulatory systems, their nervous systems, their brains. The more a child learns about many things, not textbook stuff alone, but many things through experience, through touching and then saying, whoop, I won't do that again. Whatever it is, we need to give that back to children, and that means we'd better go from where children today get all ninths of their exploratory range as I had when I was a child. I'm who I am because I had the ability to be a free-range child. Einstein, it is said, roamed freely the streets of Munich at the age of 4. Once we develop the neural pathways, then we can learn everything better, more completely, and remember it. But we need to have free-range children. And we just need it. That's not an option. I think it's important to point out that the more you protect and preserve your open spaces, the closer you can keep nature, the better off everyone is. And I don't think you'd find anyone to disagree with you on that, but then when you start into the details, okay, then we have to increase the density, we have to increase this, or something like that. Then you get into arguments, and then people fail to understand what you're really talking about. So I think it's so important for us to give a child a tree, to give a child a pond, a lake, anything that's going to make their life more complete. But let's start with giving them a street. And where you put the trees matter. The upper street, it's got all the same trees, or the number of trees, but people speed. You put the trees in the right location, you pull down the speeds a lot. But that has to be in your code. It has to be in your guide. We also had better become the best place in the world for someone to age gracefully. I'm 67, and my wife and I purposely moved to a town where it won't matter what age we are. We sold our car. We don't need a car in the town we chose. Port Townsend, Washington, small town. But I think it's important to point out that from the very first moments of life, as soon as we have cognitive power, one of the first things we want to do, and am I right about this, is be mobile, to take those first steps. This is my grandson, Jack. Just before he could finally let loose and walk on his own. And I think it's important that we understand that people may say the last thing they want to give up is their car keys. They're fooling themselves. The last thing they want to do is to be able to go out of the house and walk up and down the street. And by the way, once we walk more, a lot more, our health improves. It just does. The human being was built to walk, to be active. And every day we should do some walking. And ideally 10,000 steps a day, which is not a lot, by the way. Once we do, then even the amount of dosage we have to buy from the big corporations of chemicals to put in our body to keep us alive goes down. Might even go away. So think about that. We're going to hear about and see many new themes emerge over the time. Now that the baby boom generation is hitting their 60s, we're going to see a need to design our everything better. I feel sorry for this man, but I don't know what to do until we can redesign the street. I just don't. He probably doesn't even have the ability to go clear down to a traffic signal, which might be a quarter of a mile away. Doesn't have that ability. Not an option. But this year in February, or last year actually in February, I was able to work in Weyburn, Canada, a cold place, and every senior I photographed was walking with a smile on their face. They had dignity. Many things were built for them. Roundabouts, narrow streets, road diets, all the things we'll talk about in the second presentation. It's important that everything we build, this is Claremont, those of you who understand the beauty of that community, people want to socialize. In fact, one of the real losses in our nation is people have fewer friends. They have fewer associates. And the real way to get that back is to let people mingle on the streets, to have more places for people to come to. This, by the way, is Port Townsend, and this is why I moved to Port Townsend. I can go almost anywhere in town and photograph these things. It's a quiet place. It's a respectful place. This is San Luis Obispo, and this is why they are now the happiest city in North America. And this is what we're talking about. Do you notice, by the way, that except for one slide, I haven't even mentioned the word sidewalks? So to me, walkability is town making. It's getting the right buildings in place in the right locations, the right streets to respect where the buildings must live and to add value to those scenes, to create the right open spaces, and all these things come together to create what I define as walkability, happy people. Going a place and grabbing a morning coffee and sitting purposely so you can watch people walk by. And again, I mentioned that 70% of people ready to buy a home in America are saying this is what they want. Now, these words were written when the percentage was only 30%. Now that it's 70%, I could see these letters coming in almost daily on my internet. So, I'm going to say something fairly profound. But to do it, I need you to work with me on this. Can we all pretend it's the 1400s? Right? Does everybody know from the photograph, everything centers around the earth. Am I right about that? There's no such thing as us rotating around something else. Is that right? We can see it with our own eyes. A couple people invented some telescopes. I understand the Dutch did that. Galileo and Copernicus and others study it, and they figure out, no, that can't be right. Math says it's not right. But the church and the culture said this was right. The scientists said this was right. So they were ostracized. Galileo was actually led through the torture chambers and said, if you don't straighten up, mister, this is where you'll spend the last hours of your life. But this came to be known as the correct way that the universe works. It works out mathematically, it works out in reality. But I'm going to pitch out something just as insane as what the Galileos and Copernicuses of their time were saying. Is this true? Am I correct about this? Everything, the economy, our access, our mobility, everything centers around our automobiles? That's what we built. What if it's not true? Now, I don't want to suggest you go out and say this. I can say it because I'm only going to be in your town for a couple of days, and people say, well, he was loony. But I want to show you what the early years of the modernist era brought to us. It was a dream that one day our cities would look like this. Now we can look at that and say, uh-oh, no, we don't want that. We built that in Las Vegas, by the way. I mean, that's really what Las Vegas looks like at Tropicana and a couple places. But notice this in a Post magazine. If we are to have full use of automobiles, cities must be remade, awaiting industry that will do wonders for prosperity, will spring up when we revamp our cities. This is the result. This is Detroit. This is a neighborhood I was asked to work in a year ago, and they're trying to figure out how to do what you're doing very well on in your early changes. But I just found this June 28th, 2010. There are not just some, there are many people that don't yet get it. If we could only add more lanes, do more things. These people don't understand economics. They don't understand the world. They don't understand much. They just are looking for that last silver bullet, put some more roads down so that we can have a car-friendly city. And it wasn't one organization. This is from the Federal Housing Administration in 1938, telling us that well-connected streets are bad, that disconnected streets are good. The banks understood that. The realtors understood. Everybody understood it. And returning from World War II, if you were a GI, you could only get a loan to buy cul-de-sac. So let's start looking at the towns that are shifting. This is definitely a cul-de-sac town. It's University Place, Washington, which, by the way, has no university and has no place. They're one of my best clients. I can say this because they're trying to change. And you can see or feel what that would look like from the ground. But this is what they're working with. But notice what they're getting ready to do. They're going to put in more streets, more connections. They're going to take the pressure off of Bridgeport Way. Oh, what did I do wrong? Ryan, can you rescue me? Yeah. I think it's your computer wants an update. Does anybody know the computer here? Oh, we're off of this computer. I'm sorry. Yeah. Did you say quit? Yeah. So, again, notice this format. We've already built the first of these parallel streets. And here's what will happen. Coming off of Bridgeport, we'll add a nice little connector, and they'll build their brand new downtown in a former strip center. The city bought the land. No developer can do that. But they could, and they did. And this is what the principal road looks like. This is Bridgeport Way. When I came and did my presentation in 1999, I went up in a bucket truck, and this is what it looked like. 1 year later, it looked like this. Now this road has to move 23,000 cars. We don't have a choice. And it does it very well. And now you can see what it looks like 9 years later. Go back to the air in 1999. And now you can see from the ground 9 years after that. And so they set the stage. The road had to be changed. You can't ask somebody that's going to bring you $1 billion to seat it in a seedy place. So this is the interesting part. 11 years have gone by now. They're building their new city hall, their new library, their new cultural center, their new plaza, and guess what they're doing? They're tearing apart Bridgeport Way again to put in back-in angled parking. This is a regional trunk road. They're going to want many people to come here, and now they're putting in raised intersections to slow the motorists down, and they're doing it in a way that's proving to be very effective. It still moves the traffic. Big equipment doesn't have a problem getting over this because they put a lot of thought into how to design it. But their goal was to get people down to a speed where they'd let the pedestrians across and things like that. So times are changing. The lower street, International Drive in Orlando, the new street that's added to it is designed for people. I want to share with you that this is not original. In 1928, before the modernists took over, this was what James Perry, one of the brightest of all, was saying we could do to accommodate the car and people at the same time. This is the model. Except for a couple little places, it never got built until Seaside. And look at it. It's exactly as though Andres Duany, Elizabeth Platter-Zyberg, and the whole team just took a piece of paper and sketched over Perry's design and laid it out because it was perfect. Now, people now will pay over $1 million for one lot. They went on the market at $7,500. I got to work on the project, and the developer offered me 2 lots for $7,500. I didn't have the money. Now, here's the rule, and it doesn't matter what you're orienting to, as long as it's to the right thing, in this case to the water. This is a town, Fort Pierce, Florida, circa a long time ago. Now you'll see what it became in order to meet the needs of the auto. And there's no beauty, there's no farm, there's no performance there. We did the charrette, and 90% of what you see here is now built. And that's what we're talking about. As long as you get the original street patterns in, you can come back and rescue any place. So the more of Lancaster that got laid out correctly before the forms went bizarre, the better off you are. Now, you won't be able to do it everywhere, but you have so many places where you can do it that we can make this the phenomenal success. Quiz time. Which United States president laid out Alexandria, Virginia? George Washington. How many of you thought someone else? George Washington attended how many years of school? He never went to school. But he knew how to lay out a town because everybody knew how to lay out a town. Anyone who had a brain knew that you had to orient to the water, that you had to get a walkable scale, the proper pattern of blocks. What did this modern developer forget to do? Connect to the water. He devalued every one of his properties, the ones that are going to make great money no matter what. It doesn't matter. By connecting to the water, you're adding value to every single home. These are such basic principles that George Washington knew this, James Perry knew this. It doesn't take a college education to figure these things out. So, number 1 on our list of what to rescue, connectivity. This is a town we're working on in Sammamish, Washington. You can see their streets on the left. You can see those that actually go somewhere on the right. This is a modern suburban town. The roads on the right are having to do all of the lifting. So, imaginary trip. You live where the red dot is on the left, and you want to get to the place on the right, which is a high school. You could walk there if you just could, right? But now you have to get in and tie up traffic for over 20 minutes. One way. This is what we can't afford. Connectivity is the key. All we have to do, put in a trail. It could be a street, it could be anything. And now people can walk, they can bike, or they can drive a much shorter distance. See how important this is? Here's another trip. From, let's say, the upper left, this is a 40-minute trip in the wrong time. This would greatly simplify it, and in this case, all we have to do is take down a barrier. That's all we have to do. But the day we were there to do that, people on one side of the barrier said, if you take down this barrier, and she had a child, a young child in her arms, she says, you are responsible for the life of my child. On the other side of the barrier, her mother says, if you don't take down the barrier, you are responsible for the life of my child. Either way, I lose. It's sad that we've gotten ourselves into this conundrum where we're arguing over the wrong things. And so as a policy, the people of the community want to take down the barriers, but not in front of their house. And that's where we are. Reject the connect. So I think this needs to be a big part of your study, is how do you make the connections? But the beautiful town form, where and how you lay out a building. These posters, by the way, ultimately we hope to have 30 of them. We have 2 so far. We want people, every person, not just people who know how to read code, but every person to understand why they might prefer one design over the other, why they might want the right side placement of the buildings versus the left side placement of buildings and parking and everything. And this is our second poster. It hasn't been officially released yet, on how to lay out a school that many kids can walk to, bike to, share the park, share the resources all the way around, get some mixed use in, get all these things. So this, again, we want to simplify everything so everybody can grasp it. And now let's get down to some more details. The intersection. And I'm going to just assume the engineering community has done everything they can to make this a safe intersection. But what is the one thing you want to do when you're getting really close to this intersection and you know the light is going to change? Speed up. It's not smart, and people do it, but I'm not going to blame the engineer. I'm going to blame the architect, the landscape architect, and the planner, because they haven't pulled this off, and they need to. If we're going to have safe driving, we need this. The scene that I showed you earlier is where most motorists lose their lives and where most pedestrians lose their lives. This is very benign, and it still moves traffic. It actually moves traffic better once you get the right combinations in. So we want more walkable. We want a nice scale. We want authenticity. And no matter what the town, what the region, what the climate, what the anything, we design for that. This, by the way, is MIT. Beautifully done, a nicely laid out sidewalk with real edges defining street furniture, various things. Or in this case, Long Island. Who'd I bump into from Long Island? And again, a beautifully laid out street. Look at how well they did the edges to the buildings. The very thoughtful placement of street furniture. The key for everyone, and I'm going to suggest that all of you go and either get an app for your phones or for your computers, walk score. Does anybody know the walk score for right where we're sitting right here? It's 80. I checked it. That's not bad. In fact, that's pretty good. But for Lancaster as a whole, 55. A very important point. Now, that's out of 100. A very important point. For every single point you can go up in that point scale of 100, you're adding anywhere from $800 to $3,000 to the property value. It's all about what's near you, how well you can get there, how well connected it is. The 5-minute walk is ideal. 10-minute walk is fine. Even a 20-minute walk will work. By the way, we have studies going clear back to the year 2014. 2014. I'm sorry, 1014. We're not even to 2014. 1014. I don't even know what life was like there, but the studies show that people will walk up to 20 minutes to their fields, their streams, whatever they're going to do. So 20 minutes is the magic number. And it doesn't matter whether we will drive or we'll walk or we'll bike, 20 minutes, you can stay within 20 minutes. People have an inclination to do that first. The popsicle test. How many of you live somewhere where you could walk on a hot August afternoon and get some popsicles and bring them back to your child without melting? How many of you live that close? One? Okay. In Port Townsend, where I moved to, I can pass that test in 3 different directions. And that was part of my criteria for my house, was I want to be able to get a popsicle in at least 3 directions. The other way, I just get wet, so it wouldn't work. Important that we get back to how we design streets correctly. By the way, one of the best communities for really getting some really good street form in that you could drive to and maybe do a field trip to, Loma Linda, which is, by the way, one of the healthiest communities in America. I think it's the only one Dan Buettner lists in his book, Blue Zones. And it's all about purpose. And a couple of things that relate to that. But go to Mission Trail. It's a whole series of 3 developments, and look at all their streets. Ryan, that probably should be something that we include in the study. But both of these streets, by functional classification, by category, are the same. One will have a tremendous loss of life, and nobody in their right mind would build a home facing and watching over the street. Am I right about that? But the other one, you see mansions built to the street. So we used to know how to build these streets, and we're going to have to get this back again if we want home values as well as safety and as well as people walking. You can have the sidewalks, but if there are no buildings to watch over the street, you won't get people walking. So how do we do it? Very smart development team. Michael Friedman drew this. This is what happened to your town, everybody's town it seems. We built the strips, we sucked the life out of the downtown, so investment moves away. We did it by code, we did it by many things, all our incentives, and this is what Michael says the future will be, and I'm absolutely convinced this is what your community is already setting up to do and must do. Compress the trips to a couple locations. Many people will live there, others will walk there, others will bike there, others will drive there. You'll do it with centers. The centers will have different sizes or scales. The places in between, you might even change out the code or application, obviously. And you'll change the way you draw your maps and what the maps mean to the lower pattern, where you create the truly active centers and segments. And again, no state is doing this faster than California. I was able to be part of rebuilding the Redwood, but this is the one I want to show you, Burnaby in British Columbia. Pretty boring street, Kings Way, and this is what I saw when I first arrived, the first trip, and you can see the buildings already being built in the correct location. If you step behind the buildings, you see that they still have the strip, and actually the strip is open. The businesses were still operational. But they've laid out the parking, they've laid out where the tree wells will be, the sidewalk, and now we go back 5 years later, and you can see the building placement. This is just one of probably the first 20 eco-villages, they call them, in the greater Vancouver area. This is where many people will choose to live, and they're doing it with incredible design, places of the heart, places for people. Here's the good news. The more people live in these places, the more the home values go up in the cul-de-sac communities, which are right behind these. They're now within walking distance of great buildings. They now have high intensity delivery of transit right into Vancouver. They don't need to drive into Vancouver anymore. If they want to drive in, there will be less people doing it. Doesn't this all make sense? It's so straightforward. Now, their buildings might be different than your buildings would be. The lower stories are referred to as a podium, and they're limited by height. You don't want people to feel towered over as though they were in Manhattan or something. So it's the right height for the buildings. And then this tower actually gets set back a little bit so it doesn't dominate the street, but that's how you get the density. I believe with this one little village, they're building 7 tower buildings. I don't know what that comes out in numbers, but probably 2,500 people or 2,500 families. Beautiful streets, performing well for everybody, and nearby, very nearby, power centers. Again, that you could walk to, you can just hop on a very quick, efficient bus, get to whatever you want to do. Now, the greater city of Vancouver itself, all the things you're seeing here used to be a rail yard or an industrial yard. They did this around the entire peninsula of Vancouver, and this is now the highest density anywhere in all of North America. Here's the point. As they added the density, they left all the single-family residential stock intact. They went up in value 2 or 3 times. And now people own fewer cars. They drive less. They use transit more. They walk more. They bike more. They have lower crime. Everything that people want, they're getting because they went to a different way of building. Another eco-village, you can see it coming out of the ground. This will have its own grocery store. In fact, there are 3 large grocery stores within a quarter-mile walk of where I stood there. There, the walk score would be 100, all the things they're getting. And again, you can see it. If you stripped away the buildings, it just looks like a suburban anything. So this is what we're talking about. Delivery bays, everything has to be thoughtful, but eyes on the street. And now they can preserve and protect their great watershed. And again, it's very thoughtful how they put everything together. And by the way, this is worth a field trip. Obviously more money, more time, but we lead those tours through Vancouver and the greater area. We're probably going to do another one in October. Hudson, Ohio, sits halfway between Cleveland and Akron. Beautiful little historic town, Hudson, Ohio. And they wanted to suck the trade out of Cleveland. Ryan, you know Cleveland. And they wanted to suck it out of Akron. So they built what you're about to see. So there's their historic street, the historic homes. And now you see how you walk into the new downtown 1 block from the old downtown. And again, they took the architecture and assimilated it in their brains, and then built brand new buildings to honor the type of brickwork, the style, the delivery. And these are when I took them, buildings that hadn't even been moved into yet. This is a grocery store in their new downtown. And they are attracting the trade out of Akron and out of Cleveland, Ohio. They also, by the way, said if we're going to bring people in, we need something as extra magic. So they built a great library and natural history museum. This is a small town, and they have a natural history museum and a library because they knew the magic formula. If you want to attract families, if you want to be known as the place to go to on a weekend to rent a hotel room, whatever, you got to have attractions for children. Beautiful parks, beautiful plazas. Had you seen these before? Yeah. Now, Monterey, and I think some of you have seen this building. I don't know if you knew the story behind it, but where this building, oh, it's all one building, this is this building. Where this building sits, there used to be a parking lot, and it sat on 1/3 of 1 acre. That's pretty small. 1/3 of 1 acre, 1/3 of 1 football field. This is what's there now. 6-screen moving house, a delicatessen, a restaurant, a large shoe store, 2 plazas, and a tarot card reading shop. All the things you need in life are all in one building, right? And how much parking did they need to provide? None. They didn't have the space for. Oh, and by the way, on the top stories, 30 studio apartments. First right of refusal goes to anyone who works for the city or the county. If they don't have enough takers, sure, it's on the open market. This is the kind of partnering we're talking about to build the future. Now let's talk about how a good development will ease some of your traffic woes. In Orlando, I think you can see them. There's 1, 2, 3 very significant intersections, all of which during peak hour will tie up. So you want to go here, you have to go through 3 intersections, and it'll take you 20 minutes in the wrong time. 20 minutes. You don't want to be a fire responder trying to get through that traffic. So what if we put in this development? And what if we require the developer to put in the right street connectivity? It's not an option. You want to build? We love to have it. You must put in that street. You must put in this street. We have to have these connections. And now you're the driver and you take either the green route or the blue route. You don't need to tie up anybody's intersections. See what I'm talking about? We cannot go forward in our country with our economy, which is correcting itself, I think, in the right way, to not be a consumer society. We need to have land use and transportation talk together 100%. So if there are two takeaways, that's number two. Don't build anything with transportation that's not going to build community. Don't build any community that's not going to solve transportation dilemmas. And then, of course, many people can live there, work there, shop there, be entertained there. Let me skip this one for now. I'll skip this one too. I want to get on to a few other things. I want to take a break too. But are you going toward a form-based code? Is that part of what you're moving toward? Okay. Well, this just an example of a town that developed 3 different codes for 3 different areas: a downtown area, a conservation district area, a hamlet. Each code reads very differently, but all allow the developer predictability. If you're going to invest here, you'll get a 100% approval real fast if you follow this form. Don't try to fight it because it'll take you forever. But now let's talk about security. What's missing here if you want people to walk? Sidewalks? Crossings? Something else missing? What is it? Trees. Something else very important that's missing. What is it? You have to have the buildings. People have to watch over. So when we take our walks tomorrow, I'm going to be looking as much for would I want to walk here as how easy is it for me to come up and down your sidewalks or crossings. You have to have the buildings. If your code doesn't say the buildings have to watch over the park, watch over the schoolyard, watch over whatever, the code's wrong. We cannot have the backs of buildings face our most important places for people to walk. So this one's done pretty well. It's not perfect, but I think you can see how the eyes all watch over where we want all the people who live here to congregate and to enjoy. And we can do it. We have many, many beautiful building forms, and we can do it any size, any scale, pocket parks on up to the grand parks. By the way, wonderful story. These are affordable housing. People get support to move into this housing, but they buy the houses. These are 10 years old. They're in Petaluma, and the kids play right there. No one tells them when to get off the bench. No one even tells them what the rules of baseball are. If the rules work, they play them, and if they don't work, they change the rules. Side A of a house, and the same homes, the backside has to watch over where you get your mail, where you go to your clubhouse, where you come and park every night. So we need window transparency. We need the buildings to be required to have the right form and shape for security. Otherwise, they're not contributing. Don't build anything that doesn't work. I think you can see here, you might not want to walk on the right-hand side. You might want to walk on the left-hand side. If we could get that street down to the right size. And this is what it would feel like on that side. This is what it would feel like on that side. One's a traditional form, one's a conventional form. One's walkable, one's not. So we need to think about that. By the way, all these things I'm showing you are the same street. Just one developer doing it one way, one developer doing it the other. So if you build a trail, require eyes on the street. Period. And how you do your alleys matters. This was way too wide, of course, but at least there are windows watching over the alley, right? This one's better. Now, for somebody, it's not better. If I were the sanitation worker, I'd say, it's going to take me an extra 3 minutes to get up and down this. Yeah, it is.
That's what I was thinking.
Exactly. Now, this is interesting. I've only seen it done several times. The right-hand side of the buildings, that's the A side. That's the side watching over the alley. The other side is actually the B side. Those are garages. But notice how tastefully they're laid out. They're working. This is an A and a B combined. And then, of course, with the terminating being eyes on the street, I would walk up and down this alley all the time. I really would. You have so many models to study going around the nation. This one in where not Stapleton, or yeah, it is. Denver's old airport, Stapleton. This is Stapleton. Took out all the airfields and built this. How many of you have been to a New Partners for Smart Growth conference? Okay. Ryan, okay. The next one, I believe, is going to be in San Diego. This year, starting next week, it's going to be in Charlotte. We're doing a 3-day tour in advance to show all the new places. We'll do the same thing in San Diego. So think about that. Just get as many people from the community to go to San Diego as you can for that. It's sponsored by the California Local Government Commission, the EPA, and others. Over 1,400 people go all the time each year, sometimes more than that. But this is the right form. It's the right way to do it. Now let's talk about some other cool things. Not everybody wants to live in apartments or attached homes. What about detached? But still higher density. What about cottages? This is a book that just came out. I think the ship has landed, truly. The books were printed in China, and they were on a ship last week. But I think the ship has landed, and they'll be in bookstores soon. Pocket neighborhoods. This is the density of 12 units per acre. Each one's individual, each one's distinct. Everyone has a front porch. That's part of the requirement. They're small. They're the right size for the modern family. This one's a little bigger. This is an Aspen, but notice they put the trail in the center and then built the homes around that, and then the only access to these properties is an alley. But it's a very well-designed alley. These are all examples of what many, many cities are learning to do to craft and create really cool places. Now, we'll go to the air to look at Stapleton, but look how thoughtful they are in creating all these courts. And the courts are the center of the life of each cluster of homes. This is what they might look like. In this case, it's a different town, Prospect, beautifully laid out, just elegant in its form. This park became this after, I think, 9 years. Isn't that amazing? The fire service needs 20 feet for all their operations to pass 2 fire trucks, all kinds of things. I don't have any argument with that. My dad was the fire chief. My brother is a lieutenant in the fire service. This is the street they would favor, 20 feet. But notice what we did, the inset parking. Very thoughtful and really adding value to the homes, and very nicely laid out. These are the things we need to think about. The park right there. Get as many parks in as you can. Every park adds value to every home nearby. The general rule of thumb, by the way, would be a park within an 1/8 mile of every home. Now, how am I doing on time? Can we take a 10-minute break? Is that all right, folks? When we come back, I'll wrap with a presentation on the streets themselves. Okay. Was this helpful? Okay. Okay. Street. She's the last remaining pedestrian in Missoula, Montana. I went back 3 days later and she was still there. Now, here's my point. That's a 5-lane road. The lower road, by functional classification and arterial, is the same. Which of these 2 streets makes a lot more money? 3 to 5 times more money gets made. Which one is safer? Which one is more aesthetic? Which one produces less road rage? So why are we even thinking about building the 5-lane road anymore? By the way, the lower road moves more traffic. And that's my point. We can't build dumb things anymore. It doesn't pencil. So people will come to this street, they'll shop here, they'll build the tax base of the community. It defines the community, and that's what you're doing, and that's what we must do. Baldwin Park, a former naval base, basic camp, is now beautiful homes, and 3 of the top Congress people in the nation, including Micah, the new transportation committee chair, lives here. That's good news. We were really sad when we lost Oberstar in this last election. He was brilliant, but now Micah, a Republican representative, is going to be the chair of the transportation. He gets it. He speaks new urban. He speaks everything. Part of the tour we're going to take in a few weeks, or actually next week, oh my gosh, is to Cornelius and Davidson, North Carolina. This is what they're doing on a major road as it crosses in front of a school. They purposely narrowed this lane down to 10 feet, all the lanes, put in bike lanes, put in inset parking, valley gutters, and this is extraordinary. I watched freight truck after freight truck after freight truck go over this, no problem. Now they had to slow down. That's the point. But they handled it. It's important to understand, though, that a huge part of the future of the built infrastructure in America is moving toward more walkability, more bicycling, more things that complete our street systems. So as you gear yourselves up with this master plan that you're putting together, you're basically putting yourselves right in the pipeline for new monies that will appear, despite the fact that we've shifted the House of Representatives. We've got people in the leadership that understand what we're talking about. And now think about that. If our goal is to add value to streets, and this is by the one that's got a beautiful story behind it of adding value, then we're going to need, if we want holistic streets, complete streets, green streets, whatever it is we need, we have to have a new street design manual. There's no other option. You don't want to ask your traffic engineers, your public works directors to stake their careers online because they're breaking the rules. You need new rules. The current guidelines were built for a different era, for a different purpose. Move as much traffic as you can, as fast as you can, period. There was never a chapter in their Bibles that said how to lay out a main street. That chapter never got written. Now it will be written. And good news, that one Bible could add value to every community in America once they start to get followed. Brian, did you ever stop to think about this? You probably, because you've applied for the grant and got it, you're going to be responsible for over $500 billion of new, properly designed infrastructure. Did you think about that? Now, the rules to do what you need to do are actually pretty broad. One day I was up in a bucket truck. My client was Claremont. I took that picture, but then I said, let me turn around. So I just turned around the bucket truck and shot Pomona. Anybody see a difference? This is the same road. Route 66, Foothills Boulevard. The same funding source, Caltrans, the same drivers, and 2 completely different designs. That flexibility is already in the Bible. But we're not going to toss out the old book. We're just going to enhance it, make it easier to build what's going to make more money. How would that happen? First, add paint. You've got a lot of roads. I've, driven some of them. You got a lot of roads. Just add the paint. It's cheap. It does what you want it to do. But a little bit later, as your infill comes in, now do the inset parking, add some more details. You need gateways. By the way, we talked about Seaside earlier. This is the new community that spawned off of Seaside. It's called, I think it's called Watercolors, something like that. Anyway, we're coming off of a 55-mile-an-hour state road and coming into the community, and here's what they do. You slow down the traffic before it gets to the community. You put in the median. You put in a pre-median. You put in grasscrete for the shoulders. There's no shoulder here that you can see, but it's there. This is done very thoughtfully. So everybody who was doing 55, by the time they get past this median, is going to be doing about 25. Then when you get to the buildings, it's right. So gateways, inset parking, fairly tightly defined roadways. Road diets, another term that I understand you're doing a number of road diets, correct? In this case, I'm not going to forget my towns. Just south of Palo Alto is Mountain View. Again, before and after. Now this town used to always be thought of as the ugly stepsister in the Silicon Valley. Now it's strongly preferred by many people to go there to shop, to be entertained, to spend their money, to live there. And they gave Palo Alto great competition. So hopefully this will never happen here. Does it happen here? Every so often? Okay. This is a 4-lane road. Every single motorist that has ever driven a car will turn any 4-lane road into a 2-lane road during a blizzard. Am I right about that? They want that median. They want those bike lanes as a buffer to the fixed objects, the trees. They want it, so they design it that way. And until someone comes there with a plow and messes them up, this is the way the road will remain. So, in Michigan, one of my biggest clients, this is an example of a road diet that went in. You can see we even have the old center line in. Might be another 5 years before they repave this road. But it's been working now for over 8 years. Generally, when we do a road diet, the crashes come down 20 to 30%. And in some extraordinary cases, they'll come down 70%. Just depends on what the crash history is, what causes them. This street in Mountain View is a road diet. If you look real close, you can see the old scrub lines. Think how much safer it is to make a left turn out of a protected pocket than it is if you're in an active 4-lane road. In Hartford, Connecticut, a city that is among the poorest in the nation, they're now up to 17 road diets. We went in and did a whole study of the entire town, worked with the neighborhoods, and 17 road diets are going in. Their average crash reduction is hovering around 30%. Here's why. If you have a 4-lane road and somebody all of a sudden wants to turn left into a driveway, whatever, you have one choice: crash. If you don't like that choice, swerve. That's not good. And if it's a 3-lane road, you're already in the lane that you want to be in, the through lane. And then the fire service wants to get around a car in the lane. Now they've got a whole open lane they can go in, and so it's better for somebody that wants to pass. You can see the other types of crashes we are able to avoid. You're in the red car, and the red car on top. You want to turn left, and you feel pressure to do so. You think you see a gap, but it's being screened. That is a very wicked crash. That goes away. So here's the street before, same street after. From 5 lanes to 2. From 4 lanes to 2. Okay, so that is a road diet. Oh yeah, of course. I should know that. Okay. Now some of the other roads you might want to pull up some more tools. This is Manitou Springs. It's in Colorado, snow country. That used to be a 4-lane road. They got a new bypass. The Colorado DOT built them a beautiful bypass, and it was needed. A lot of traffic goes through these nice little mountain towns. And so once the bypass went in, the traffic went away, and the downtown was really struggling. So I came in, did a presentation, and mostly to the business community, and didn't think anything would happen. They formed a committee. They said, let's do this. They did it. and they boosted their sales immediately after it went in 30%. To a business person, that is huge. And by the way, it works so well that people park a boat in the third lane. And just to run in to grab their worms, whatever fishermen do. But it's so much better than trying to find the other. The fire service parks their fire trucks out there while they're cleaning the bays. They love it. When they need to get to a fire, if there was someone in the process of parking or unparking, it doesn't matter. They've got the whole road. And traffic calming. Are you already doing traffic calming, things like mini circles and chicanes and medians and things like that? In the planning? Okay. So many ways to do traffic calming and talk about add value to a neighborhood, to create the parks, the added trees, the things. Getting back to Charlotte, North Carolina, notice there are no curbs in the park. This was laid out by Olmsted himself many years ago. And these are very prized neighborhoods to live in. These home values have never dropped during this recession. Do trees matter? Of course they do. This is the same street. It's 20 feet wide. And I will typically, when I'm there, drive down the section with trees, monitor the speed of the motorist in front of me, and then watch what happens if the motorist gets into the section without the trees. Almost guarantee the speeds will go up 10 to 15 miles per hour. Almost a guarantee. In fact, so far it's always happened. Now, another term we're using, smart streets. I don't know why we need so many names, but I think a smart street might define something slightly different. This street, before it was redesigned, speeds were 40, 50 miles an hour. They'd lose about one teenager a year. Gone, not on the planet anymore. They redesigned the street, and except for one huge drug overdose where the kid launched himself and landed through somebody's roof in the house, you know, there are things we can't solve. But except for that, the crashes just drop completely. And here's the really cool story. This is the first roundabout in the state of Washington, also in University Place, Washington, which has how many universities? And how many places? Or at least before the street, yeah. Once they built this street, it was so beautiful. They put in, I think it was 9 roundabouts. The streetscaping that you see. And now anything that wasn't up to snuff stood out. So they, city manager called in the executive for the county, and they were standing on the corner, and he said, "We'd love to have you take down this barbed wire fence. It's ugly and it's ruining people's feeling along the street." So the county executive says, "What's on the other side of the fence?" Oh, nothing. It's an old gravel quarry. It's actually the gravel quarry where they took all the gravel for all of the Interstate 5 through Oregon and Washington. It was a big gravel quarry. So they went and looked down in. He said, "Okay, I'll take down the fence. I'm also going to build a world-class golf course here." He did, and it's the most beautiful golf course facing right onto the Puget Sound and the mountains of the Olympic range and so on. And even before the golf course was finished, the U.S. Open came and committed to the 2015 U.S. Open. To that city, that's $15 million. Before you even start to fill hotel rooms, $15 million. This road project, $2.5 million. You see my point? You want whatever road you build to bring you the U.S. Open. Make that your gold bar. You know? But it's beautiful. It's got nice details. We made sure that we put in bike lanes wide enough that if the fire service is coming by, a car can pull in and completely keep the deck open. Now, when we get down to the critical dimensions with Ryan's guidebook, we have to pay attention to these. So in our case, it was 17 feet. We measured the equipment, we tested it, figured out 17 was right. Tree wells. Again, you're already doing many of these things. Tree wells, though, are an incredible enhancement to a street. Side streets included. Nice edging, nice detailing. You don't need bike lanes on all streets, by the way. And when the speeds get up higher, say above 25, bike lanes become very, very important. You can actually put bike lanes into back and angle parking. You can't put it next to front in parking. And so these are all options we're giving to our client, Encinitas and community down that way. And look at all the nice little details. For the bike lane, for example, in the right location, putting in 2 rows of cobble is really a nice detail. We're working on that with a second client on how to do that. Notice here we're taking out lanes, just as you did. We're colorizing the bike lanes. The bike lanes do make a difference here. This is a very, very, very heavy bike flow. Solana Beach, those of you familiar with Solana Beach? But this is the one I really wanted to get to show you. This is in Long Beach. It's called the Green Sharrow Lane. It's brand new. Only 2 cities so far have it. And it's just amazing. See if we can, obviously the crossings. Driveways. Now notice how much easier it is to get out of this driveway with the curb extensions. How hard that would be if they weren't doing the curb extensions. Here you go. Now, the Green Sharrow, like this. And there's Ryan on the left, I think, isn't it? You, Ryan? Yeah. And now the motors, by the way, this road carries 38,000 cars. It's a big number. And everybody quickly gets that. I don't think they have any special signs up at all. That if there's a bicycle in the Green Sharrow lane, they own that lane. That's it, period. Don't even think about tuning your horn. And anyone who wants to park enters that lane. Anyone who wants to unpark has a way to move. And it's absolutely profound, and that's Long Beach, little community there called Belmont Shore. And now we're getting people riding bikes we never would have seen before. Never. And they're not on the sidewalk. They're riding where they feel comfortable, including younger folks. And they're out of the door swing. So that's what we're talking about. Now let's talk a little bit about the speed reductions. How do we do that? West Palm Beach, remember the story of West Palm Beach. There used to be 3 lanes here. Each lane was 12 feet wide. That is a big street, one way. And we decided not to tackle the one-way issue, but to take out the extra lane we didn't need. And one may say, well, what about the traffic? In West Palm Beach, part of the chemistry was we took out 16 lanes. In order to make it a civil place for people, again, to get the speeds down, to get the people to come back, to want to live there, we took out 16 lanes. Traffic today is working better. When you build too many lanes, you can store a lot of cars, but now have more time waiting at the intersections. So look in the other direction. This used to be 36 feet. We have to set the clearance interval to get the pedestrian out of the street based on how wide the street is. You get it down 20 feet, you can award more green time to the other lane of traffic. So there's a lot that we don't know that we're learning, but we're learning it very fast. Probably one of the most profound tools that you and other cities will learn to do is to take out signals, put in roundabouts. Roundabouts move 30% more traffic per lane. Roundabouts eliminate 90% of personal injury crashes. And that's just the first 2 benefits. They also become very authentic, attractive gateways. This is Fort Pierce that we looked at from the aerial angle. Every season they'll change their decor, and same intersection. That used to be 5 lanes. This used to be a nightmare. People would line up for sometimes a quarter of a mile. Now there's no backup up more than, say, 5 cars during their peak moments. First roundabout in the state of Washington, placed where a high school, middle school, elementary school were. All the schools, for some crazy reason, would release at the same time, so the parents were coming and going and all these things. 1.5 mile backup on all 3 legs. 1.5 mile. Roundabout went in. The longest queue anyone has seen is 6 cars. It is the most powerful way to keep your traffic moving and keep your lanes to the right number of lanes. They now can get beautiful school crossings in. This one's done well. You could go and add some other detailing. This truly saved this neighborhood. People couldn't even sell their homes on this street. And here's where collaboration comes in. A good friend of mine, a traffic engineer who lived on the street, said that none of her neighbors were able to sell their houses. People just didn't want to live on a street with high speeds. They just didn't. And other people were selling their homes in Orlando, but they weren't. So they knew the city had a program where the city would pay 25% of the cost to put in brick. The neighbors had to pay the other 75%. So they approached the city, asked the city, can we have the brick streets? And the city says, no, we're booked up solid for 5 years. And they said, well, what if we pay 100%? Cities like that. And so they said, yeah, I think we can work with you on that. And indeed, you guys put up the money, a 10-year bond, no interest for 10 years, and make the regular payments, and we're going to toss in 2 roundabouts. They did. Within weeks after the construction occurred, their homes were worth more than they thought they were worth, and they were selling. Roundabouts work for everybody. They really do, when they're designed correctly. These are some we built in La Jolla Boulevard in San Diego.
One of the benefits of the roundabout, as he mentioned, they carry more traffic, than signalized intersections. When we do road diets, it's really important to have that capacity. And as the traffic engineers will tell you, capacity of a roadway is determined more at the intersection than it is mid-block. So if we can deal with the intersections with roundabouts, it provides us with more opportunities to do road diets in the mid-block. So this picture, that's La Jolla?
La Jolla Boulevard.
Okay, they took a 5-lane road down to 2 and put roundabouts in. So it enables you to do all of these other things.
That's great. And by the way, took out all the signalized intersections plus a 4-way stop, put in roundabouts. Speeds went from 40, even 50, down to 20, sometimes 25. People are getting home sooner. We can't afford to build the systems that take longer to get home and doing it at exotic speeds where someday, you'll cash in your chips or somebody else's chips for them. So we're learning. This was one of the first in Colorado, deep snow country. But notice how easy it is for the pedestrian. The motorist on approach is going so slow, they're likely to yield. If one didn't, they're forcing the next motorist to yield. Where we put that crossing is absolutely fundamental, critical. One of the roundabouts on Grandview Drive, you can see the beauty of the water that used to be totally hidden. Now it's totally open and shared. Roundabouts fit nicely in neighborhoods. This is a gateway entry into one of our neighborhoods, Grandview neighborhood in Clearwater, Florida. You can see now, I think, the difference between a roundabout and, if you look further up into the same image, a mini circle. A mini circle, very inexpensive. You can get them in for anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000. If you want them really beautiful and exotic, you can go up to $25,000. But the point is they work. And we now have probably 100 roundabouts at schools. This one also in the same neighborhood. Slightly larger, we can handle up to 24,000 cars in a roundabout. We used to have a couple in Florida that handled 28,000 single lane roundabouts. It all depends on loading factors and other things, but we know we can get it easily 15 or 20,000. It's just after we get up to a higher number that we have to make sure the models work and things like that. They can be aesthetic. We need edges. And again, once we get out and we look at what you were able to do on Lancaster, right, the boulevard, I think I'm going to see all these things a little different than that one or different than this one, but I think I'm going to see edges. Am I right about that? And this is in deep snow country up in Breckenridge. But important to have the edges. Beautiful on big roads to have the edges. In this case, critical to have these edges and to buffer, separate the pedestrian from the street. So when we do the walking audit, we want to talk about edges. Edges to a parking lot, edges to everything. And by the way, that's a 4-lane road. And until I said that, you wouldn't have known, would you? So having the median. I've got to remember the spot. San Diego. Close enough. Pittsburgh. Kirkland, Washington. Right downtown. Centers. Okay, we need edges, we need centers. So what you do with the medians, how well you do it. This used to be a 5-lane. They put in a boulevard, traffic's moving better. But again, you should include in your design criteria for everything you do streets that you never have to see more than 2 lanes ever. The eye doesn't get to see more than 2 lanes. Now, you won't always be able to do that, but what they did here, notice they domed and then added the green. You'd have to use, obviously, different materials. Now let's get into the performance of the road. This is one of my favorite roads in America. It was designed by an engineer, first project out of graduate school. There's 4 lanes here, and there's only a point of access into the neighborhood maybe every half mile. But look what they did. No motors can come in or out that way. But anyone in the fire service or law enforcement knows that that's a hardened green strip. They can go right over there, code 3, to get in, to get out. It's for them. And this is how the motors gets back the right direction. They can only turn right in, they can only turn right left, but within half a mile, they're going to get to a little corner clip. And now they complete their direction. Now here's the interesting thing. If they would sit there and wait and try to get across, they'd probably wait longer than it takes to drive down and do the little turn and come back. It's not only much safer for them, but it adds to the efficiency of the road. We can do it at an intersection. And in our case, we recommend coming back from the intersection so that we keep the intersection compact and let the U-turns occur here. That's designed for a wheelbase of 30. What's the biggest piece of equipment you have in terms of the operating wheelbase?
Our operating wheelbase is
32. Okay, so you'd want to design it for 35. Give the new driver a break, right?
And there's also a new standard coming out for fire trucks that could possibly be even longer for the fire engines. The emissions and stuff for fire trucks. I don't know the whole story yet.
Yeah, well, hopefully that won't force you to buy that equipment. Be very sensitive to the equipment you buy. Make sure the service, the performance can be done. But one part of that service is getting to the incident. Here's something we're doing for the fire service. We're putting in what I call jump lanes. So the intersection is totally locked down. You don't want the fire service to wait until it unlocks. So they basically just jump and go contraflow through the intersection. Curb extensions. Is that you again, Ryan? Ryan, you show up in a lot of my images. Okay, okay. It's a wannabe Ryan. Yeah, someone who wants to be Ryan. So let's talk about curb extensions. Before you put in your curb extensions, your street might look like this. The pedestrian has to cross 58 feet. The motorist is confused. Those people parking feel exposed. You put in the curb extensions. It's a totally different picture. You now have beautiful space for gardens. You have full protection for getting people in and out. In fact, here's one of the great benefits of curb extensions. It allows the big vehicles to make their turns. Somebody could park too close to the corner and eliminate the turning. You put the curb extensions in, you deal with the sweep of the vehicle, and now you're helping the fire service or the sanitation worker or the Coca-Cola bottle deliverer get to their mission. We don't want to hold up Coca-Cola. It opens up sight lines. You can now see the pedestrian. Pedestrian can see the motorist. And they're beautiful. They absolutely are stunning and help bring back property values. Now let's get to the big guys, the intersections themselves, standard intersections. To me, this is beautifully orchestrated. This one in Mountain View. Post-mounted signals, getting the motors to look at the road, at the pedestrian, at the traffic versus the much higher strain poles, which fortunately I don't think California ever went that bizarre. But these are beautifully done. Notice you can see from all angles of approach. We can also do countdown signals. This one I showed in Abu Dhabi, where they're doing many new treatments there. And not only countdown for how much time you have to get across the street, the green, how long you're going to have to wait. I mean, they're truly ahead of us on some of these technologies. So, you know, you got 40 seconds, 25 seconds in this case to wait. Raised channelized islands to get the streets down to the right size. They're already putting in raised channelized islands to slow the motors down when they're going to be in conflict with the pedestrian. Very wise. Raised intersections, and really heightens the quality, the aesthetics of a street. This in Baldwin Park again, Orlando. Channelized islands, here they're already doing the raised channelized islands in Boulder, Colorado. Again, think this is snow country. The percent grade that has to go over, and keep in mind they have to deal with the grade to also deal with snow plows. So they're coming up with the right formulas. But look how much safer it is to cross this street than if that channelized island weren't there. Back to Abu Dhabi. Back to Boulder. I don't know why it happened that way. Who knows? You can colorize your intersections. But again, notice how much you can shorten the crossing distance using channelized islands for your turns. Median noses, very important. You want to control the left turner speed. I think this one's pretty well done. I think they put in an exotic radius up there on the right. Does everybody see that? That's stupid. I mean, it really is. They really blew it. But, hey, they got in the flat median, which is good. Many circles, a little more on raised intersections. This is the happiest place in North America, San Luis Obispo. Cal Poly. Any graduates of Cal Poly? Be proud. Anybody here ever hear of Cal Poly? Yes. Oh. It's a great school. It is. Again, getting back to West Palm Beach, also West Palm Beach. Charlotte, North Carolina. Columbus, Ohio, my birthplace. Vancouver, or I'm sorry, Victoria. Oswego, help me out, Ryan. Thank you, Oswego. And again, beautiful streets. And again, you'd use different plant materials, but you use the same principles, the same concepts. And I think I already covered roundabouts, but let me tell you the history of the first roundabout in Florida in modern times. This is it. We had to move 18 to 20,000 cars. This is a principal road in Florida. Here you see it from the air. That's a very tight location. And so I went to the fire service. I said, you know, we're losing one pedestrian every year here. Would you be willing to work with us and let us build a roundabout that won't let your truck go right? Or I'm sorry, go left. We can still do right turns. We still do through. He says, yeah, we can come in a block earlier. We can go in a block later. Doesn't matter. We have a grid. So this is where we fit it. This is what it was like before. Again, we're losing one pedestrian every year. And this is like 15 years later. You can see the land values went up significantly. This was the kickstart of the brand new downtown. It took this to tip that point. And so the price of one roundabout we truly launched an entire area. And 15 years have gone by, no recorded crash yet. Not just fatalities, no recorded crash. And it's moving now 23,000 cars. This one, moving 21,000, but on peaks they'll get up to 23. Here's the myth. Roundabouts cannot be used when there's an imbalance loading. You have some side street traffic, you only get 2,000 cars a day. Principal Road gets 23,000, the cars on the side street won't get in. That's been a myth. I know who created the myth. I know the day that person declared that myth. And so this town, we'd done a walking audit. I had suggested a roundabout for this. It's a historic location. And they were already predicting that if they put in a traffic signal, the backups during high school release would be 1.5 miles. They also get a trains coming through, and that would set up a huge long line of cars coming through. And so I basically said to them that they really needed the roundabout. I went back a year later. We were doing the walking audit for a booster shot, and I suggested that this was the great location. They said, Dan, we've already ordered the traffic signals, and they're sitting in the factory. We'll install them next week. I said, well, that wasn't what we decided. They said, well, we hired a traffic engineering firm. They said the side street traffic wouldn't get in. They didn't really model it. Most people wouldn't even know how to put in a predictive model for side street traffic. I said, look, it's a myth. They looked me in the eye and they said, are you sure? I said, sure enough. And they sent the signals back to the factory. They put in the roundabout, $361,000. The most traffic that has ever backed up is 6 cars. I go there peak hour, peak day, peak season. The longest I've ever waited to get in from the side streets, 40 seconds. If they had a signal there, guaranteed I'd wait 2 minutes. We have to get rid of the stupid myths that myth makers spend their nights dreaming up. And that's got to come out in our guidelines. Okay, so here's a car. And by the way, this car wanting to get in on the side street. And here's why that car will get in. Every time a pedestrian comes, every time someone wants to make a right turn, every time somebody wants to make a left turn, sometimes people want to park or do a U-turn, they're opening up the side streets. Hamburg, New York. 3 sections of road through their town. They used to be rated number 12 out of 12 villages. We went in and redid a plan that a conventional engineering company had done, and at the request of the mayor, the city council, and everyone, we came in, worked with the New York DOT, totally changed out the plans. If you look and study this road, notice how easy it is for the woman up there to get in and out of her car. How wide are these lanes? 9. That breaks all the rules. We took out all the signals, put in all roundabouts. Again, they're 9-foot lanes, but guess what? With this transition lane, it's not a bike lane. It's not wide enough to be a bike lane next to parking. The parking's only 6 feet. And the point is, we have to use our brains and come up with some new combinations if we're going to come up with winning streets. This town works so hard, so well together. This is what anyone would fear. You got a truck making a delivery, another truck can't get by? Yes, it can. It may only go by at 10 miles an hour, but it will get by. And it won't even have to go in the other lane. This is a major truck route. And here's the point. The truck drivers just want to stay in motion. They don't want to grind down and wait at a signal and grind and grind and grind until they can finally get underway. They want to stay in motion. If we come up with a design that works for everybody, everyone is served. Now, here's the cool thing. This may win the top new street in America award by the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. It's already in the top final 10. We don't know when they're going to announce the final. But the other thing, and this is what the community cares about, they learn to work together in order to get this to the level they now invent new things to work on together. They've come up with all kinds of street festivals and other events. They went from rated number 12 out of all the 12 villages, they're now number 2. Hamburg, New York, near Buffalo. Probably under 20 feet of snow right now. Kids can get to school. Here's how the pedestrian crosses. They come, they look the correct direction. You can see a car could store there if it needed to. Doesn't in this case. And there's, as she approaches the center, the third motorist back realizes he's not going to go anywhere. She looks the correct direction. She's out of the street, and not one car has been delayed. Had that been a traffic signal, one pedestrian could shut down and build up another 200 yards of cars. Now this is off the charts. Just like you folks amazed me and dazzled me this morning with the story about the Monterey visit and one Dan and one beer equaling your new downtown. And that's what I'm told, right? That's going to go out on world press now. This is the town, Manitou Springs, that we did to the road diet, 4 lanes to 3. And I said, you really need a roundabout here, but it won't fit. They hired a team that could figure it out. They said, well, we're going to get the roundabout in anyway. It's flat. And it works. The big equipment comes, they just roll right over it. It doesn't matter. We can now do colorized shoulders. The street on top became the street on the bottom. The speeds came down 3 or 4 miles an hour on a major U.S. road, US 27, in front of my house. Colorize the center turn lanes, another feature, crossings, and really where you're going to expect a pedestrian-rich environment, try to get a crossing in every 400 feet. And that means most the pedestrian would have to cross would be, go out of the way would be 200 feet. High emphasis marking, so inexpensive, so much benefit. You can see why a motorist who only sees parallel lines, even good parallel lines, only gets a tiny bit of visual information. But with the bars, they see huge amounts of information. So think about that, how you're going to use combined tools, curb extensions, crossings. In snow country, they'll grind down a little bit and inset them. They'll last over 10 years. Madison, Wisconsin. Solano. Fairview, thank you. I'll remember it later. So, anyway, think about where you put the marks. Don't want motors driving over them. You want to drive them around them. And again, so many tools we now know. By the way, for the blind, having the ladder style is all the better. They need an edge that their foot can feel. Port Townsend, Washington, result of a conference I gave. A citizen went back, ran for the city council, worked with the engineering community, and got this street totally redesigned. It's a beautiful street. A diet plus a crossing here in front of a school. Kids can now get to school. Notice we put in a 45-degree angle to slow down the pedestrian from running and also force them to look straight at the car. Golden, Colorado. A visual trick here, the actual opening is 13 feet, but the motorist only gets to see 8 feet. Is that cool? Use our brains and not our massive amounts of money. Back-in angle, and I'll end here. Do you have back-in angle yet? Where you put it in, how you put it in matters, but it's not a new trick. It's been done forever. Any vehicle type can do it. Cowboys can do it. Classic car owners do it all the time. It's greater for benefit for anyone who wants to use their trunk, get in or out of their car safer, and do deliveries, do actual work. I just can't imagine why front end has hung on as long as it has when back end has been there all along. Seattle now has 200, 400 blocks worth. It's just the safer way to park. It increases your yield over parallel. It's beautiful, it's aesthetic, it buffers the pedestrian better. It's just good design, and I'll close on that. So, with that, Ryan, you want to say a few words before we open to questions and answers? And let's pass the baton so we can hear everybody on the cameras. Yeah.
No, I think we'll open it up for comments. I mean, at some point I wanted to get back to your free-range kid comment that you made earlier today, but let's open it up.
Have you ever designed a pedestrian-friendly auto mall?
No, we could do that. There may be one that's being created up in Spokane, Washington. There's a set of 2 parallel streets there, and I know at least a mile of auto mall is there. And I think we're putting that on a road diet, taking it back to a 2-way street and putting it in very wide sidewalks. So it may be underway right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just apply all the same principles to that part of the street as if it were another type of retail.
Yeah. Good question.
My question is about pedestrian crossings around schools, particularly where the crossing may not happen at an intersection.
Mid-block. Yeah, mid-block crossings, especially near schools. The one I showed you just a few slides back, that's exactly what they did. They went away from the intersection to put the mid-block crossing in a better location. Here's the important thing. Add a signal, add a 4-way stop, anything 4 lanes coming, or 4 collision of total of 4 directions. You have 32 conflict points for motorists. You have 24 conflict points for pedestrians. If you move the crossing for pedestrians away from the intersection to a new location, mid-block, there are only 2 conflict points. It depends on the number of lanes. If it's 4-lane, then you have 4 conflict points, but you're only dealing with 2 at a time. They're all coming from the same direction. So it's far safer for anyone to cross the street mid-block.
The key is to add all of the right devices depending on the number of lanes, the traffic volume, traffic speeds, and so forth. You need to add the right devices to make that crossing safe. But anything from crossing islands to curb extensions to high visibility crosswalks, advanced yield bars, and a number of other tools we can use, again, depending on the intersection. But as Dan said, they can be safer than crossing at a regular intersection because of all the conflict points at regular intersections.
Yeah, engineers can get totally frustrated. They do everything they can for the pedestrian at the intersection, and they still watch the pedestrians crossing away from the intersection, right? I mean, it's just the way it is. Well, there's a reason why the pedestrian's doing it. They don't want to wait, and perhaps they figured out in their own head they don't have to deal with right turners. They don't have to deal with left turners. They can see what's going to happen. They can deal with it. They may be wrong. At night, the pedestrian grossly overestimates their ability to get across the street. They cannot see and detect. The human brain cannot tell how fast a car is going at night. You're not getting enough visual information. You could think a car's going 20, but it's actually doing 45, and you enter the street, and your life is over. At 45, your life is over. So we need, if we're going to design mid-block, to pull out all the stops, put in all the right tools.
Good lighting. Yeah. Also, a lot of pedestrians, particularly younger people, underestimate how visible they are to motorists.
The motorists.
Talked about an app for walkability, which was fascinating.
Yes.
But is there national statistics on pedestrian fatalities? My guess, without knowing, is our community, I think the Valley Press said the other day, 31 people lost their lives last year.
Here.
Yes, I would bet that's quite high because of the street designs we've inherited and had for a long time. And I'm just wondering, you know, is there a national metric that we could measure against, and if we implemented some of this, we could fix it?
First of all, they're pretty good data. I think last year, 3,800 people lost their lives as pedestrians. It slightly went up last year after coming down a little bit. What we know is that most of the fatalities of pedestrians occur in communities like yours. You can go to Seattle, Portland, Washington DC and maybe one fatality a year, maybe. And you come to here, as you say, multiply that times 30 by population, multiply it times probably 100. Yeah, you're grossly out of sync. Now, how to correct that? Obviously, the most important is get your speeds down, way down. And most of the fatals are probably happening in your 5-lane and 6-lane and 7-lane sections. Am I right? Not often in a neighborhood street? Yeah. Yeah. And that does fit the national model, is that the faster the traffic, the more difficult it is for a person to get across the street. And think about this. Half of the fatals that have occurred in the Seattle area are transit related. They've got 5-lane roads. You're being dropped off on the other side of the street. You've got to get home. You might have a child in your arm. You might have groceries. It may be dusk. Those are pretty wicked conditions. I don't know why I'm having hard finding words today. Now, the other is you're on the side of the street that you need to be on. The bus is coming. It's on the other side of the street. You know there won't be another bus for 30 minutes. You're going to take some pretty extraordinary risks to get there. We've got to build the density. We've got to build the land use. We've got to build everything to work together, and we've got to get people across the street.
The tricky thing to measure is actually getting a good pedestrian crash rate. Ideally, we would have a number of crashes or injuries or fatalities per pedestrian mile traveled, and that's very, very difficult to do. What you see is in you'll have more pedestrian crashes in cities where there are more pedestrians. But it doesn't mean that they're more dangerous, it just means that there are a whole lot more people walking. And so that's normal, but what we really need is a measurement of pedestrian crash rate. They're starting to develop, I mean, we can use some numbers like cities from the US Census have the number of people who commute to work by walking, for example. And we can have injuries and fatalities per that number, and that gives us kind of a gross crash rate. But ideally, later on we'll have something, crashes per pedestrian crossing or something like that. But as Dan said, what we're finding is that communities that are sort of built like Lancaster for sort of high speed, generally the numbers indicate that we have sort of higher pedestrian crash rates in those than more places where cars are going slower.
One of the things I noticed in pretty much all the slides related to the roundabouts, where they were single-lane roundabouts, and I'm curious because you talked about how there were multi-lanes and then they narrowed down to the single lane. Has there ever been, I don't know if there, in any of the experiences you had with dual or double-lane roundabouts, or is the idea to actually avoid those? Or I just didn't notice there were more than a single-lane roundabout there.
Yeah, once your traffic numbers are, say, above 22, you really have to pull out some extra steps and measures to make them work. But again, we've got some that we've got working at 25,000. But let's say you're at 30,000. You have to have a 2-lane roundabout. We're building a lot of 2-lane roundabouts now. We're building them well. The one we put in Clearwater Beach, we are moving 56,000 cars plus 10,000 pedestrians a day. That is a huge amount of traffic. I don't believe that Wilshire Boulevard through West Hollywood, Route 66, anywhere is moving more than 50,000. Might be 51 or 52. Oh, Wilshire does, but that's 6 lanes, right? Yes. Yeah, so that's a step above. But we rebuilt the Wilshire Boulevard in, am I getting it right? Santa Monica Boulevard, Route 66 through West Hollywood, and that's 4 lanes. And I know we were doing right at 50, 51, 52,000. We could, in a couple of those locations, have gotten in roundabouts. Would be beautiful down by the connection to Beverly Hills to have a roundabout there. Jiminy, what an arrival in both towns. And that would eat up the traffic, spew it out, and be a beautiful gateway. Yes, you probably have
dozens of locations where eventually you're going to want two-lane roundabouts. But try to get in singles and try to get the singles built first so that people understand them, they get them, and so on. We're now doing entire corridors where a series of roundabouts are way outperforming the former sections. But in many cases, we can get a 5-lane road down to a 2-lane road because we're rebuilding the intersections as singles. But there will be numbers that we can't get them down enough.
Earlier in the morning, you had a slide of a building, and you commented that it accommodated probably 2,500 residents. I was struck by that number because in our urban residential zones, one typical square mile could probably fit 3 of those buildings because each of our square miles average about 7,500 residents, and that's at a 4 units per acre zone, 7,000 square foot lot. That's actually our minimum for our single family residential zones. In the communities that you've visited, of all the slides that you've shown, what's the, I guess, ideal density range that's conducive to walkable neighborhoods?
Okay, a very good and very critical question. Historic neighborhoods were running 5 to 7 units per acre. The ones we're in love with, single family, nice lots, everything. And that was walkable back then because we had enough people in each household, they had enough people walk and so on, that you always saw people walking, therefore you walked and so on. Today, that density won't perform. The average home size now, family, is what, 1.5? 2? Per household. Or, no, it's 2.1, isn't it? 2.1?
I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, but now both members of the adult family are off working and not there, and children are in, whatever. So we don't see people walking. We really do need to get the densities up. If people are to walk, they need other people walking. So if you go to still single family, but much nicer use of land, you can get clear up to 11 to 12 units per acre and still have single detached. And once you get into apartments and townhouses and cottage parks, pocket neighborhoods, you can get up to 12. Once you get into the bigger units, I think 16 to 22 is very good for still only 2 stories, sometimes 3. You can then, of course, get into much higher densities. 60 units per acre is a pretty good tower style building, but not that big. A lot of what they're doing in Vancouver is running 60 to 120 units per acre. And here's the neat thing, is you don't need it everywhere. You just need it somewhere in that village to have the bigger densities so that you can support all the families that want to live in the single family unit. But again, I think we're probably going to say that we really want 8 units per acre or even 9 or 10 in time. And just use the land smarter.
Yeah. And that's really sort of your beginning point. It goes up from there. And part of it has to do with what land uses are close by. I mean, retailers need a critical mass of customers before they can provide a store, for example. And sort of the more customers you have, the more stores you can provide. So if you want to live in a neighborhood where within a few blocks you can walk to a grocery store, you can walk to a movie theater and restaurants and all this, you need pretty high urban densities. But if you want just, basic walkability, and probably 10 to 20 units per acre is sort of the starting point for, creating a walkable place. But the more you have, the more things you can have. There are things that only happen in Manhattan because of the really high density. I mean, the fact that you can walk in a couple blocks and there's 3 different jazz clubs, within a 3-block area. I mean, it's all about critical mass. So it's sort of a matter of how much you want. The other component is your street network as well. I mean, you need to have a grid of small streets with small blocks to make a walkable community, and that's a really important part of any sort of density.
To add to that, and again, no one knows how this economy is going to shake out. We just don't know. We're entering new territory, but we're not going back. Everybody agrees on that. Any economist you ever talk to says we're never going back to what we were. But think about this. Those towns that embrace good street farm, good design, good density, good everything, good mixes, are going to make it. Those that don't, they're not going to be building place. They're not going to be attracting the new jobs. The governments are going to go more and more bankrupt. You need the density. You need the villages. You need to attract the new jobs, the new everything. And so by paying attention to what you're now setting yourselves in line for, you will make it. And I can't say that about every community I work in. I just can't.
And if I could add one thing to the challenge for Lancaster, over and above what he just mentioned, the distance, I mean, Lancaster has, depends quite a bit on commuters going into the valley and so forth. Well, the price of gasoline is going to go up. And we saw what happened, a couple of years ago when the price of gasoline went to $4.50 a gallon. It's going to go a lot higher than that. So we really have to start to think about what happens, when gasoline's $6 and $8 a gallon, what happens to Lancaster? It's going to have a harder time than some other suburbs that are closer in. So it really, I think you need to really embrace that sort of more walkable vision of a community. Sylvia, you had your hand?
I just want to know how large is what's a walkable block? Do we have like 600 feet? Have any size requirements?
I'll see what Dan says. I think 200 feet's ideal. But
yeah, Portland, Oregon is built to 200 foot long blocks. Now, where the developers made a lot of money doing that. I mean, you think about how much more corner buildings are worth than if you're more interior. 200 works beautifully, but not everybody can pull that one off. 300-foot blocks are absolutely the cat's meow. What we say is you take the perimeter of the block, give the developer some latitude, and our measures go anywhere from 1,400 feet to like 2,100 feet perimeter. So you could have a block that's 600 plus 600, that's 1,200, and then 200 and 200, so that'd be 2,000. Or you could shrink it a little, have a 100-foot depth and do it, but don't get over 2,100. I mean, you'll have that rare location where you just have to have a 4,000-foot block, but don't allow super blocks to exist. In time, you've got to get back to 2,100 would be your biggest, but if you can get down to 1,200, all the better.
I think you start to lose something when you get over 400 feet.
Length for a block.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you definitely need a mid-block crossing once you get up that high.
And would that be for residential as well as commercial?
Everywhere. Yeah, if we're doing neighborhoods, we're asking developers not to go above 2,100, but try to stay at 1,400.
I actually, on that question, your last question, one of the observations I made the last time I was in Portland, Portland's hosting a lot of conferences on topics like this now because they're doing so many things right. Portland had a lucky history because they started with 200-foot blocks. And it was interesting to me that, I took a tour of some of the bicycle boulevards in some of the older neighborhoods where you've got single-family neighborhoods, 2-lane streets, and 200-foot blocks. But when you get to downtown Portland, which is a 30-story downtown, guess what? 2-lane roads with 200-foot blocks. And that same pattern works in the 30-story downtown just like it works in the single-family residential neighborhood.
I just wanted to kind of follow up on the comment you made early in the presentation about how the cul-de-sacs are a thing of the past. They're not coming back. I just kind of question that because I think that it's not the cul-de-sac that people are not wanting to go to. I think it's the fact that the way most cul-de-sac communities have been developed over the last, 50 years is there's no connectivity. So I think the issue is really connectivity. Because I grew up in Valencia where it was, all cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, but done right.
But but connectivity.
Yeah.
And if I could afford to live there, I'd be living there today.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we should, just, say that we're not going to build cul-de-sacs. I don't think that that should be part of, Lancaster's plan to say we're not going to do cul-de-sacs anymore. I think that cul-de-sacs are, to me, I'd prefer to live on a cul-de-sac.
Sure.
But the issue is
Right.
having that connectivity, that walkability, that you could walk down to the end of the cul-de-sac and connect to something.
Right. And I apologize, probably better to use a different term than cul-de-sac, but in everybody's mind, they represent the disconnected streets, no parks, schools not necessarily there, and big wide streets and things people now are saying they don't want. And we may still want cul-de-sacs done well, like Valencia or Columbia, or what was there were only 3 that were done well.
Davis.
They did do well, although they had to come back and retrofit a lot of it, where Columbia and Valencia were purposely laid out the correct way, using cul-de-sacs effectively.
Yeah, the only thing you don't get in a neighborhood like that, it's still much better to have it connected that way for pedestrians and bicyclists. But the only thing you still don't get with that type of neighborhood is you're still not spreading the traffic, which means that you still need the big multi-lane high-speed roads or not necessarily high-speed, but you're going to need bigger roads to carry the traffic somewhere. So you may be able to get around within that neighborhood, but you're still going to have to cross a busy street somewhere. And when you have sort of completely gridded streets, you don't need many 4-lane or big busy streets like that. So
yeah,
that's the downside.
And by the way, I'll leave behind 2 what I consider very important articles. One I just wrote, it hasn't been published yet, for the Michigan Municipal League, where Chris Lineberger and other very brilliant writers and I are actually developing a book for them. And I think you'll want the whole book once MML releases it. And I think it'll be free. You just download it from the web. But the other one is an article I just wrote for the Institute of Transportation Engineers, also not yet published, that is really groundbreaking. It talks about complete streets, not what they are, but why we have to have them if we're going to have an economy that works in the future. Lots of research, lots of depth and detail in both of these articles. So I'll leave those behind so that you can distribute them.
Question have you given a similar presentation to big merchant builders, KB Homes, et cetera, and what has been their reaction to your presentation?
Yeah, I haven't. I have presented to a national group of home builders, kind of like the steering committee for the national home builders, and I did 2 hours worth of presenting to them. They get it. Now, when you get down to Pulte Homes or any of the big factory organizations, the ones that are probably building a lot of your homes, they're in a tailspin. They know it. They may not know the way out, and it might take a decade for them to fully figure it out. So what I'm saying is, yes, we need to reach them. Absolutely need to reach them through every conference, every way we can. And if they're alert and if they're going to survive, they're going to go to the New Partners for Smart Growth Conference and other critical conferences, and they're going to hear it, and they're going to adapt. A lot of developers will never build another house. That's just fact. A lot. But some of the big shareholder-held corporations, they're going to adapt. And they're already doing it. But they, too, would tell you that 70% of the home buying market now wants what you see in Mission Trails in Loma Linda. That's what people want. They'll pay more for it. It will pencil out. That's the one type of housing that has not softened a lot during this recession. Regular conventional cul-de-sac houses have softened so much that I don't think developers are even breaking even in many cases.
The value is not recovering. Yeah. KB and Pulte actually are starting to, they're getting into a lot of this. And the other one is Lewis Homes. Randall Lewis goes to a lot of these conferences. I mean, he and I have presented at conferences before. So he's really on board with quite a bit of this already.
Yeah, Randall really sucks up the New Partners meetings. I mean, he's one of the big presenters there. And one of his spin-off people, Glenn Ellsworth, went and started his own company, and he's the one who built the Mission Trails in Loma Linda. And Randall Lewis owns all the land on the other side, and he's just waiting for the economy to return, and he'll probably do exactly what his Breakaway partner did. But really, truly, it's not that far, I don't think. You can do it in, what, 3 or 4 hours drive? Yeah. But again, go to Loma Linda and look up specifically Mission Trails, Mission Hills, and one other mission. But they're 3 together, and really a story worth telling.
What about national retailers?
Retailers. Some of them are really getting it. What we are seeing more and more is really good streets that get rebuilt, that the towns are having to make a decision that they don't want to be totally overtaken by national retailers. They want a mix. You want your mom and pa. And here's a very important thing for your Main Street, and you probably already know this figure. The Power Center, you know, Best Buy, an Office Depot, whatever, is only going to give you back 20 cents to your community out of the dollar that gets spent. 20 cents. That's not much. Walmart, Target, all those. The big store, like, say, a Gap or a Victoria's Secret, whatever, they'll give you back a little more. They'll give you back 40 cents. The mom and pa will give you back 80 cents. The money recycles in the community because they're hiring not only local people and paying them appropriately, but they're also keeping it in the bank in that community, and that's where it starts to really start to generate the serious economic gain. So don't ever go above some percentage of national chains. And whether it's 30% or what the percentage is, just don't let them dominate your street and steal from the mom and pa.
And a growing number of the big retailers are figuring out, you know, they're getting a more sort of urban model that they're working with now.
Mm-hmm. And we're seeing like a Best Buy on the ground level and then an Office Depot above that. So we're seeing double-decker partnering. The Metropolitan, if you want to study, the Metropolitan in Charlotte has that style. Yeah.
In a community that's already been built out, is it possible to get the mini circles and roundabouts without taking significant land from other people?
Yeah, well, the good news about the mini circle is you don't even need any land. They just fit no matter what. Seattle has got 1,200 on the ground, and they have the models, the templates for streets that are 20 feet wide connecting with streets 22 feet wide. You've got buku land. So yeah, you'll be able to get the mini circles in easy. The roundabouts, probably most of your important intersections, you'll be able to get them in fine.
Yeah, especially here. You've got plenty of space at your intersections, I think, for roundabouts. I mean, especially if you're going to do them in conjunction with any road diets.
Okay.
Maybe can I just add, actually go back to something that Dan mentioned this morning. He mentioned free-range kid. Do you know what that means? Okay, let me just give an example. I always like to talk about, you know, my childhood. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, but this was true of people that grew up in New York or Los Angeles at the same time. From the time I was 8 years old, I could get on my bicycle and go anywhere in town. You know, after lunch, I'd go out and go to the park, and we'd play basketball or go swimming or just hang out and do things, and we'd walk home from school and stop and do all sorts of things on the way home. I had to be back in time for dinner, and if I was 5 minutes late, I got in trouble. But the fact of the matter was, an 8-year-old kid could just go out and roam and do things, and this is really a valuable experience. How many of you grew up as free-range kids? Okay, so you remember what that was like. And nowadays, how many kids are free-range here? You know, if we were stuck at our home, we called that being grounded. That was like being punished. And I think we're robbing our children of their childhood to some degree, where we don't have communities where they can be free-range kids. I think it's a really important part of growing up, to be able to go out and explore and learn and do things and make mistakes and make up games. You know, we have, you know, go out to a field, you make up a game. You don't have to have, you know, today we have a lot of structure to game. Kids belong to soccer teams, and that's good. But remember the games we used to just make up? Just take a ball and anything, and you make up your own rules. You know, that sort of unstructured play is a really important part of childhood. And I think that that's sort of what we wanted to get back with trying to create these sort of livable, walkable communities, is bring back that sort of childhood that really fosters development. So.
Good. I think we've gone to our allotted hour. Was it a value? Was it a benefit, everybody? Yes. So those of you who are department heads and so on, talk it up among your staff and have them all come this afternoon. We'll do basically the same thing, but it'll probably be a different twist based on who's here. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.